All right, class, welcome. Let's get started. Today, we're diving right into the architectural blueprints for building some really powerful AI agents using Google's Agent Development Kit. So here's what's on the syllabus today. We're going to start with the real fundamentals, the core building blocks. Then we'll build on that, moving all the way up to some pretty complex multi-agent systems. Okay, let's dive in. Module 1, the core building blocks. Look, before we can even think about building something complicated, we've got to nail the basics. And the first, most critical problem you'll face with any AI agent, just controlling what it says. Yeah, if you've ever worked with LLMs, you know this feeling all too well, right? One second, you get a perfect response. The next, it's just a jumbled mess. For a real-world app, that just won't fly. We need reliability, we need to enforce some structure. And the answer here is a feature in ADK called structured outputs. I like to think of it as a template, or maybe a better way to put it is a contract. You're basically forcing the LLM to respond in a consistent, predictable JSON format that you get to define every single time. And what's so cool is how simple it is. You're not wrestling with some crazy config file. It's just a Python class. You're literally telling the agent, hey, you have to give me a subject and a body, that's the deal. And it's this simple rule that makes the whole thing predictable enough to actually build real software with. All right, so we've got the output under control, that's a huge step. But what about remembering things? I mean, a real conversation isn't just a one-off response. An agent needs a memory, right? It can't just forget everything you just said. This is where ADK's sessions come in. Think of this as the agent's short-term memory. It's like a little notepad. It keeps stirring your chat, letting it track the conversation, remember what you're talking about, and actually give you a response that makes sense in context. Okay, on to Module 2, and we're sticking with memory. Because let's be honest, that temporary memory is great, but it's not enough for the real world. What happens when your user leaves and comes back the next day? You don't want the agent to be like, who are you? We need long-term memory. So right here, this is one of your first major design decisions. You've got two main options. The in-memory session service is super fast, great for quick tests, but poof, the memory is gone as soon as you restart. For anything serious, you're going to need the database session service. That's what gives your agent a real persistent memory by connecting it to a database. Let's move on. Module 3 is where things get really interesting. We're going to talk about building an agent team. So we've got one solid agent, right? It can control what it says, it can remember things. But what happens when a task is just too complex for one agent to handle? Well, you don't build a bigger agent, you build a team of specialists. And this really gets to that classic dilemma, doesn't it? Jack of all trades, master of none. If you try to make one agent do everything, it's just going to get overwhelmed and slow. The much smarter move is to break down the problem and assign different pieces to different specialized agents. Now, ADK gives you two main ways to approach this. First, there's sub-agent delegation. Picture a manager who hands a whole project off to an expert on their team. The expert does the work, makes the decisions, and delivers the final product. Then, you've got agent as a tool. In this case, the manager just asks the expert for advice, gets their input, but ultimately, the manager makes the final call. The key difference? It's all about who's in control. All right, Module 4, Advanced Agent Workflows. So, we've got our team of specialized agents, but now we need a way to make them work together, right? We need a conductor for our orchestra. And in ADK, that's exactly what workflow agents are. First up are these sequential agents. The best way to think about these is like an assembly line in a factory. They're perfect for any process where the order of operations is absolutely critical. Where the output from step 1 has to become the input for step 2. A textbook example of this is qualifying a sales lead. You'd have one agent whose only job is to check if the lead's information is complete. If it passes, it moves down the line to another agent that scores the lead. And finally, a third agent recommends what to do next based on that score. See? Step by step. But of course, not every problem is an assembly line. What if you just need to do a bunch of different things at the same time, and they don't depend on each other? Well, that's when you bring in the parallel agents. This is your go-to pattern when speed is the name of the game. Think about a system monitor agent. It needs to check the CPU, the memory, and the disk stats all at once. You don't want it to wait for the CPU check to finish before it starts checking the memory. You fire them all off at the same time and get your results back way faster. And last but not least in our workflows, we have the loop agents. Now, these are for those situations where it's not just about getting an answer, it's about getting the best answer. When you need to refine and improve something over and over, this is the tool for the job.
This is pretty amazing, actually. It's how you can build an agent that basically reviews its own work. So picture this. One agent drafts a LinkedIn post, then a second critic agent reviews it and gives it a score. If that score isn't perfect, it sends it back to the first agent with feedback. And that loop just keeps going until the post is exactly what you wanted.
All right, final module for today, choosing your Gemini engine. We've designed this beautiful, complex system of agents, but every car needs an engine, right? With ADK, that engine is a Gemini model from Google. And trust me, the one you pick is going to have a huge impact on everything. Performance, what it can do, and of course, how much it costs. And it really boils down to that classic triangle of trade-offs: power, speed, and cost. You can't always have all three. If you've got a super complex problem that needs a lot of brain power, you're looking at a pro model. If you need to handle a massive volume of tasks and you want that sweet spot between speed and intelligence, that's where the Flash models shine. And for those jobs where latency and cost are everything, you've got super efficient options like Flashlight. And that's a wrap. Your masterclass is officially over. We've gone from the fundamentals of structured outputs and memory all the way to building and orchestrating entire teams of specialist agents. You now have the architectural blueprints. You have the patterns for building some seriously sophisticated AI agents. So the only question I have for you is, what are you going to build first?